If you're a lawyer looking to see what the deal is, I do not support piracy, I do not condone it, and I also do not engage in acts of piracy. Alright, who wants to talk about why people pirate games? Okay, so first and foremost, the whole piracy thing has always been a gray area. Like, you can download emulators and rip your own ROMs, but you can't play somebody else's ROM on your emulator. You can buy a game and rip the ROM off of that, but then if you resell the game, you have to delete the ROM, I think. If Nintendo and Sony allow you to log multiple accounts into multiple consoles, and you play two players with yourself at that point, is that piracy? Streaming shows and sports, I think, is it piracy if you're watching and if you are streaming it? I don't remember. And I like to keep it that way, because I, up until this point, have never pirated, because I know that if I had ever engaged in any act of piracy, I'd probably be in jail by now. That's why I don't download anything illegally, I don't sideload apps on my Fire Stick, I don't even know what RetroArch is or which consoles it works on, and most importantly, I don't even know where to find ROMs that people Google and then end up on links in Reddit, followed by going into a Discord chat where they have to send 17 messages in order to be able to get access to a Google Drive account. This is all news to me, it's stuff that I find online, it's stuff that I would never do, because piracy is theft. Well, actually it's copyright infringement, which is technically not theft, because I believe the definition is you're taking property such that the owner is deprived of its use. So you're not a thief if you're a pirate, but that's besides the point. We still shouldn't engage in acts of piracy, even though it's very easy to pirate. Like, very easy. I don't know if there are more tutorials for anything out there on the internet than there are for how to pirate on any electronic you own, which is absurd to me because this is an illegal act and this stuff should not be on the internet. And don't give me none of that victimless crime BS. I do my seatbelt before my car starts to turn. I will never jaywalk across any street ever, and anybody that does a rolling stop at a stop sign deserves to be imprisoned. So yeah, I just wanted to make my stance clear. And I'm sure you guys are all the same. Not a single one of you has 10 terabytes of video games that they did not purchase sitting on a hard drive on their desk and they downloaded it without a VPN, without a single warning from their ISP. We are all good citizens, we will follow the rules, and we will follow the laws. So now that we've established that myself and all of my viewers are not the type of people to engage in piratic acts, can we discuss why people decide to pirate? Aside, of course, from going after that booty. So, historically speaking, you're always going to have people that don't care about the law. That's inevitable. It might be the guy that steals a bag of chips at the store, or it could be somebody that messes around when they're doing their taxes. Generally speaking, the whole situation is monetarily driven. Either somebody does not have enough money, or they're trying to find a way to get more money. Or they could also have money but not want to spend that money. In essence, piracy is no different. Strictly speaking about our current modern day idea of piracy, you can kind of date it back into the 80s and 90s when PCs started to get a little bit more popular. There were certain softwares that made it pretty easy for you to buy a game or program and rip it onto a disc. Folks were finding a way to get illegal cable. People would go to the store and get a cassette tape and rip whatever was on it. But I remember the piracy scene really started to blow up, at least in my circles, when we were in the early 2000s and CDs played a big part of it. Music CDs were being sold for about 25 bucks, or you can get a bootleg one for like $5. This was the same time that the PlayStation, PlayStation 2, Sega Dreamcast, they all started struggling because people were downloading bootleg games. Well, I think it was less downloading and more buying. Most people would go to some kind of shady underground market and pick it up. Unless they had an uncle that would travel around the world and usually they'd come back with a binder full of them. I'm talking music CDs, DVDs, PlayStation games, Xbox games, everything. And there was always that one kid that lived 3 blocks down that knew how to mod everything, that would make sure your gaming console is able to play it. At least, this is what I've heard. Again, I've never partaken in any of this. Now, as time has gone on, piracy has changed a bit. There's been a never-ending chase of cat and mouse, a forever game of tug-of-war between developers and hackers, and at this point, decades of legal battles to figure out exactly what is and what isn't piracy. And because the gaming industry has grown as quick as it has, the idea of what is and isn't piracy has had to adapt over time. There was a lot of talk about piracy last year, or maybe it was the year before, the fun with the Nintendo Ninja lawyers and all that stuff. You can probably find tons of different videos on the history of piracy, and some pretty good ones actually. I remember I was watching them for a bit. Now, that being said, there is one thing that I've always found to be consistent when it comes to piracy ever since I was younger. Outside of some outliers that I would consider digital hoarders at worst and kleptomaniacs at worster, maybe, for the most part, your average Joe is not pirating, either because they don't know how to or because they are moral individuals. There's definitely a very large bubble within the gaming community that does fly the black flag, but I gotta imagine it's a fraction of the pie. But regardless, it's gotten a lot larger as time has gone on. It's become a mainstream talking point. Not only is it much easier for pirates to congregate on various forums online, but there's also been a very strong push against it throughout various chains of media. I'd argue it's a much bigger talking point than it actually needs to be, financially speaking, but of course, because the victim here are the corporations, it's amplified beyond belief. Which is funny because this is one of those things where nobody really gets punished for it. Don't get me wrong, there will be people who are made examples of, and a lot of those people fly way too close to the sun. I'm talking they're creating businesses out of it. But the percentage of people that actually get in trouble for it is so small that I can comfortably round it down to 0. There are grandmothers that pirate, and they're not getting in trouble for it. Now in their case, it might involve using an illegal app where they can watch something without paying for the license to watch it, but it's still piracy. Now, a lot of time, people will actually pay in order to be able to become a pirate. Like previously, they might have been paying somebody to hack a video game console, maybe they were paying somebody to make them a custom CD, maybe they were paying for some kind of illegal streaming service in order to watch their favorite sports team. So it's not like these people are necessarily broke. They can clearly afford to do it. They pay a lot for this stuff. Sometimes it could even get into the hundreds. It might be a little bit lower than what you would be paying to the provider, but generally speaking, people have shown in the past they are willing to pay more in order to not have to sail the high seas. But the problem, the motivation, the whole situation really kind of comes down to one thing that I've been talking about for the past few days. Greed. Now, obviously, my perspective is very arbitrary. But as I've gone through my life, I've noticed more and more people gladly willing to pay for a service, even if there is a very easy alternative that doesn't cost any money. In the case of almost every single one of those services, what happens is, once they get you, they eventually start to slowly raise up the price. Add the ads back into the picture. Remove various content available or hide it behind a paywall. And just in general, really screw up the situation so badly that it gets the person to have to second guess whether it's worth it to remain a part of the service. Think of all of the good services throughout the year that provided something that made people stop pirating. Pandora and Spotify for music, specific broadcasting apps that'll make it easier to follow your favorite sport, your Hulus, your Netflixes, your Disney Pluses, all of it. Heck, even YouTube Premium. In every single one of these examples, I challenge you to go and Google the problem with that specific service, and you will find repetitive comments that look like they were taken from one thread and added to another. The first thing you'll see is that, of course, now they're raising the price because all of us subscribed. You'll see a comment about the addition of ads and how now they want you to pay more for the ads, and then how eventually the price that you pay more also gets the ads. You'll see how they took it down from being able to stream on 4 or 5 devices down to 3, but you gotta pay extra if you want to make it 4 or 5 again. It's just a crapshoot, and it evolves over time. Whenever one of these streaming services would surface, they would get a flock of new users. Everyone would talk about how great it is. A lot of people that have joined that service were people that used to pirate, people that used to illegally stream. Now, obviously, the main reason they started to stream in the first place is because they got sick of paying $200 a month to Comcast. So when the apps came around, they provided a solution. You no longer had to pay for a full cable package in order to stream a single soccer game. Here's my own experience on the matter, and then I promise I will turn this back into a discussion on video games and Nintendo. I've followed the Premier League for a very long time. For those of you who don't know, that's the soccer league that's in England. Football for you Europeans. In order to watch all of the games on my favorite team, I used to have to pay for cable. I think at one point there was like a deal with Xbox Live where I was able to watch soccer games on there too. That was a fun time. But for the most part, if you had Dish Network or if you had Comcast or any of the big names, you were able to watch the games, and eventually, as technology advanced, you were able to stream the games. I think in my case, I basically had to have Comcast, and that would allow me to be able to access the app to watch the game. Now, in typical Comcast fashion, since so many people were subscribed to the lower tier, which would give you access to that app, they found a way to weasel it so that in order to be able to watch the games, you had to pay for a higher tier. And then of course, beyond that, eventually, you had to pay for an even higher tier. Eventually, they ended up releasing something where it would allow you to download an app specifically and you wouldn't have to have Comcast itself. That app turned into 2 apps. Of course, some of the games were on this one, some of the games were on that one. This one was free if you already had internet with X company, and the other one cost you $5 if you were already affiliated with, I don't know, something else. I'm trying to keep this vague, but I also want it to be as confusing as it sounds because it is actually this confusing. To put it simple, you are at a point right now where if you were to follow a Premier League team and you wanted to make sure you watched every single game, you would need some kind of service provider, whether it's YouTube TV, Comcast, Dish Network, etc. You'd have to make sure you're paying for the one that has USA TV, which is on, I think, the 2nd or 3rd tier. Paying for that service will allow you to use the NBC Sports app, which will give you access to all the games that are televised. But some of them are only on the NBC channel, in which case I think you actually have to watch it either on the TV or on the NBC app. And oh yeah, every now and then, the games will be on Peacock, so you gotta have that one too. Mind you, this is only if you're trying to follow along while they're playing in the Premier League. If your team is in another competition, like one of the European leagues or one of the League Cups, you're looking at ESPN and Fox at this point, and each one of them could potentially be just as confusing. Basically, it gets so convoluted that when my nephew a couple years ago asked me, what do I have to sign up for in order to be able to watch the Man United games or Liverpool or Arsenal or pick any team really, I honestly didn't know how to answer him. I wish I can just be like, hey, there's this app, $20 a month, bam, you get all the games. $30 a month, bam, you get all the games. At one point in time, I remember thinking to myself I would be comfortable paying something close to $50 a month in order to just be able to access every single game for the team that I enjoy, and that wasn't available. Like, there's always this app over here, or that ISP over there, or this broadcasting station over here. They never make it simple. So you know what everybody ends up doing? They pirate it. Now that's everybody not including me because I am a law-abiding citizen. And for my nephew's sake, I told him to pick up another hobby because watching sports is too expensive. The point is, I think there is a very simple way in order to make sure people will pay for a service, and it's to actually provide them a service. But the problem is, there's a monopoly. A monopoly run by the corporation. They set the price. And if you want to follow your favorite team, you're basically going to have to pay whatever it is they want you to pay. And they are always going to find a way to make you pay more. Whether it's through various apps, increasing prices, adding new tier levels, anything. Because they don't care, they have nobody to compete with. You're going to watch, so you're going to pay. I'm specifically speaking about following a team in the Premier League, but I watch other sports too. I have shows that I enjoy watching. In almost every single one of these cases, I have to give you just as confusing as a breakdown. Now thankfully, a lot of these TV providers have found a way to bring the prices down. But the only reason I can say that is because I know how to game the system. I know who I need to call and which department I need to speak to in order to make sure I don't get ripped off. I don't want anything bundled. I don't want them to raise the price after 6 months. I don't want them to send me a box for internet. Nothing. I don't need anything. I just want to watch these dumb games, and I have literal calendars on my phone to remind me to call different corporations at different times so I can complain to somebody. Otherwise, I'm paying 4 or 5 times the cost monthly. Most people, I imagine, are not as insane as I am. They will either say, this is not worth the headache, I'm just gonna pay what they want and let it go, or they will pirate. And more often than not, the free option sounds more appealing. Greed always ends up ruining everything good. I initially was intrigued by Game Pass Ultimate. It had a pretty low entrance fee for quite a while. I enjoyed it so much, I actually ended up buying an Xbox Series X, which I think was the first non-Nintendo console that I had purchased since the Xbox 360. When I was on the Series X, I didn't buy any games. Why would I need to? Game Pass Ultimate was affordable. It was cheap. And if you knew how to screw around and cancel at the right times and get back in, you could end up getting away with $1 a month. And that $1 could have even been paid with Microsoft points if you had Bing as your default browser. I'm one of those losers that had a Nokia Windows phone from back in the day, so I had a crap ton of Microsoft points, so Game Pass Ultimate ended up basically being free for me. But even when I ran out of the points, I think up until it hit $12, I was still willing to pay. I was definitely getting my money's worth. $12, I beat a single player game, maybe even 2 that month, and I would never play again. That's fine. $12 was about what I paid when I would buy a first-party Nintendo game and then sell it used 5 years later. And again, because I'm a psychopath, I would know which months I was going to be gaming and which ones I wasn't, so I would cancel Game Pass Ultimate any chance I could, because I knew I could resubscribe later, and then if I did resubscribe half the time, it would be like, oh, here, you can have it for $1. It was fun times, but I know there was a very sizable period where I was paying $12 a month. Now, mind you, before the Series X came out, I think it was only $5 a month, so they had already risen the price one time already. Not long after that, keep in mind today, the Xbox Series X has been out for about 5 years now, they increased the price. We're sitting at, I think, $20 a month last time I checked. I've reached my limit, I've since canceled it. It's no longer worth it to me. So now instead of giving Microsoft a steady flow of $12 a month, my Series X sits in the cupboard, and whenever there's a game that I want to play that's not available on the Switch, or I want it to be more powerful, I'll buy it for the Series X. Generally speaking, I'll buy it used too, because I know I'm only going to play it once. Or since usually I'm playing older games, I'll just pay for the digital price. It's much more affordable that way. So if you were to calculate it out, I pay significantly less to Microsoft now. I buy the 1 or 2 games a year that I want to play, I do my Halo Online, and I'm good to go. Now the funny thing is, since most of the stuff I do play on Xbox ends up being a lot of that third-party free-to-play stuff, I don't have a subscription for anything on there anymore. The only thing that I actually ended up buying in all of last year was Sonic and Shadow Generations. Which means instead of me paying over $100 for 12 months of a subscription, instead I paid less than half of that and bought a single game. Microsoft, through their own greed, lost a subscriber that was pretty loyal. And I'm sure I was not the only one. Nintendo, admittedly it took them much longer to get to this, but did an excellent job by implementing the Nintendo Switch Online Classics. There's got to be some kind of statistic, but I am fairly certain that the most thing that is emulated throughout the world are classic Nintendo games. With the addition of the NSO, they made it so that you pay $20 a year and you get to play those games. Now obviously that's in addition to playing online, but still. Genuinely, I don't know what the statistics are for people that play online, or people that have it just for the classics, or people that have it for both. But I'm sure there's at least a portion of the population that is only paying for NSO in order to play these classic Mario games. Again, it's only $20 a year, it's very affordable, you get to play the games you played as a kid. By doing this, I think Nintendo effectively combated the piracy and emulation of their older titles. I would suggest even with the expansion pass being at $50 a year, because it's convenient, a lot of people were willing to pay for it and stopped emulating altogether. I personally know a lot of people that stopped pirating. Actually, no, I don't, because that's illegal, but I hypothetically, personally, could have known a lot of people that used to pirate and play pretty much every single game that was on the NSO, but instead, now they just pay for it. A service and an alternative was provided. Now, these are classic games. There was a pretty big issue with Nintendo when it came to emulation of actual Switch games, as well as modding hackable Switches. Keep in mind, the only Switches that were actually hackable were the ones that were purchased at launch or close to it. So as a general rule of thumb, people tend to buy the launch day Switches if they were planning on pirating. Some people will buy a launch day console and leave it to the side and not open it until somebody gets an exploit out. This is of course disgusting illegal behavior, but if somebody were to hypothetically want to undergo in piracy, they would have to make sure they bought a launch day Switch and then keep an eye on the online community to figure out when it would be hackable. But again, don't do this. This is very illegal and very shady. And I know what you're thinking. Why would somebody want to do this? What would push somebody to do something this illegal, this despicable? And I think it's very simple. Because they feel like they have no choice. Now I know what you're gonna say. This is a video game console. You do not need it. And you're absolutely right. I'm not even being sarcastic. You actually don't need to do this. You don't need to play every single game that comes out just because there's hype generated around it. You don't need to buy the new Switch and pirate the games that come out eventually just to prove a point. I would much rather you don't even buy the Switch at this point, because screw Nintendo at the moment. But the fact of the matter is, when people want something and it becomes a regular part of their life, they are going to rebel if they feel like they are being treated unfairly. It's very difficult to go to somebody whose only source of entertainment is video games and tell them, since you can't afford video games, you cannot play them anymore. Since all of your friends are now much richer than you have to stay on the current gen console and you can't keep up with them. And I understand, again, these are not needs, these are wants. Nintendo is not starving anybody. But try to explain that to a 16-year-old. Try to explain that to an 18-year-old. Try to explain that to a 20-year-old. You're wondering why they're going to start pirating? That's why they're going to pirate. They're being ripped off. And again, I have to reiterate, this does not justify piracy and it does not justify stealing. But if I am Nintendo and I am trying to combat piracy, and I know that nobody is going to arrest all of these people that are trying to illegally download my games and pay my stuff without playing, why am I not taking that into consideration when I am providing the service for them? Is it because they don't negotiate with people that want to do illegal stuff? Fine, don't negotiate with them, but you're gonna get a loss on your console and some of your games sold at that point. Genuinely, I think the Nintendo Switch 2 might end up having one of the largest homebrew scenes out of every Nintendo console during its lifespan. And I say that because I think they are suffocating the gamers. And if you're still here, hear me out. And for the 5th time, I need to reiterate, I don't support the acts of piracy. There is no justification, but sometimes we need to understand why things happen and not just say they shouldn't happen. Nintendo is suffocating the consumer, and what I mean by that is they are not giving you any leeway at all to be able to play their games if you can't afford it. There is no used option anymore. There is no sale anymore. There is no wait 5 years and it will be cheaper anymore. Nothing. A lot of the comments that popped up on my original video about me not buying the Nintendo Switch 2 were about people that lived in various countries around the world where the price for a Nintendo Switch was absurdly high. And now the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to cost them double that. They're going to pirate the hell out of these things when they get a hold of them. Because now, not only is the price for entry so much more expensive than it was last gen, but even the games have gone up in prices. They've removed all of the discounts. They removed the coins. They removed the buy 2 games for $100 thing. Someone commented saying that games used to cost them $50 each because they would always buy 2 at a time. And now they say they're going to skip out on purchasing the Nintendo Switch 2 because each game is going to cost them $70 or $80 with no deal. Easily, there could be so many more people that feel the exact same way, and those people might know how to hack a system. They might know how to pirate. The Switch had a huge pirate scene, and the reason why I know that is because of the Nintendo Ninja Lawyers situation. Because again, I don't partake in this stuff. I only hear about it in YouTube videos. But basically, I think if we ever do make it to the launch of the Switch 2, and we get past this whole tariff situation and the pre-orders are all done, Nintendo's going to be dealing with a massive piracy scene. Especially if they start taking it apart and realizing that the exploits that worked on the first one will also work on the second one. It'll end up coming pretty quick. At the end of the day, however, it is on Nintendo to realize there is no actual risk for people to pirate. You are not going to catch all of them. That doesn't make it right, but it's a reality. Instead of being an obnoxious company that pulls down every use of their IP, I'm talking fan games. I'm talking YouTube videos. I'm talking pictures used on a restaurant that's based out of South America's Instagram page. Instead of spending all of that money on so many lawyers, why don't you just make your product better? Why don't you just make it more affordable? Because I guarantee you, if you were paying so much back then, you're going to be paying a lot more now to keep those things in check. Put your first-party games on better sales. You don't have to crash and burn in order to make a Nintendo Selects lineup. Let the patient gamers actually come in and play later on without paying the same price or more than some other games that had just came out a week ago. And now that you're bringing GameCube emulation onto the Nintendo Switch Online, I beg of you, for your own sake, do not increase the price on the Nintendo Switch Online app, because everybody knows what Dolphin is. But of course, in a typical Nintendo fashion, instead of doing it this way, keeping the price fairly affordable at $50 a year, you just know they are going to try and go full throttle against any type of GameCube emulator out there, spending whatever they can to take them down or make their life as miserable as possible in order to make sure GameCube fans have nowhere to turn but the Nintendo Switch Online, despite their inevitable increase in the price. But if there's one thing Nintendo, all of these corporations, all of the license holders do not want people to know, is they know that in effect they can't do anything about it. And as proven time and time again throughout the years, eventually they will find a way to accommodate you. Movements are built on protests, they're built on rebelling, they're built on shady practices, they're built on people doing illegal things sometimes. I am not in support of anybody that does anything illegal to combat a video game company, or heck, to combat their government, but I've read enough to know fully well that that's the only way things have ever gotten done before. But at the end of the day, I'm not trying to start a revolution. I'm just trying to play Mario. So please, be like me, and don't engage in piracy, and don't engage in any illegal acts. And hopefully, by falling in line, Nintendo will eventually pat us on the back and give us a platinum coin.